everyone, and welcome to another session of virtual wine tasting hosted by WineClick. Well, we are very happy today to present the wines of Rainer Weiss to our guests today. And Rainer Weiss is a winery from Austria, and this is a new agency relationship for WineClick. So let's see, how did this relationship started? For me, it seems like it happened just not too long ago, where we were introduced to Mr. Weiss by a good friend. Mr. Weiss sent us some wines. We tasted the wines. We like it. We called him to have a Zoom session because nobody can trouble us now. Nobody can do a tasting face to face. And that's how we met. And I must say we were impressed by his ideals and his philosophies, by the stories, by the tenacity on how he wants to start his vineyard and how it evolves to today where he put his name on the label. So with that, very quickly, we asked if we could bring his wines to Singapore and to share with good friends, to share with good clients. And that was how the relationship between us started. So today, we just received our shipment a couple of days ago. And today's lineup includes two varietals, Riesling and Gruner of Atlena. And these two varietals, we presented over 3 different quality wines, regional level, village level, and Premier Cru level. I'm sure you guys would like to know more about Austrian wines and Rainer Weiss wines from him rather than me. So without further ado, I'd like to hand the stage over to Rainer himself to share with you his passion and his wines. Let me present to you Rainer Weiss and his lovely daughter, Christina, that's with us today. Rainer, please.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity to show you our wines and, as Alice said, our philosophy and how we to make wine here. You did already some virtual tastings, and I'm quite sure our history is quite different to many others you have already seen. Alice already implemented a bit. I'm the first generation winemaker here at this winery, and Christina is second. Exactly. Even though you might see at the background, we are sitting in a very, very old cellar. So let me start at the beginning. This was in 2003, when it became possible to found a winery. This was, if you want, more a kind of dream of my childhood. I always made wine, sold wine, was in the wine business, national, but also international. But always there was, as I said, a bit of a dream once to have my own label with my own wine name on the label, as Alice said. And this became possible in 2003. But since we had no winery, no vineyards, no cellar, I started a bit different to others. This was in the Bahal area, or maybe let's start where we are. We are in Krems, in the town of Krems. It's about 70 kilometers west of Vienna at the Danube. So we are in the eastern part of Austria, where we grow wine, where we actually ski very little, but where we grow wine. And the growing areas are very small compared to internationally known ones. Kremstal, where we are now in, is about 1,300 hectares, whereas further on, further to the west, also at the Danube, the Wachau Valley it's about 700 to 800 hectares. So very small. So I started in the Wachau Valley, only 4 kilometers maybe from here. In a rented cellar, we bought grapes, well, I made wine and I tried to sell it. And obviously this worked. We were looking for something bigger and also something own for the real home for the winery. And we ended up here, as I said, in a very old cellar, which was the former cellar of a monastery. Monasteries do still have holdings here. Most of the time it's vineyard, but still also some buildings. And this was one which wasn't in use for 50 years before. So we were able to buy that and renovate it. But for us, this will be a project which will be ongoing. So Christina will still have some work. Yeah. Well, and yeah, also something Alice already mentioned. We are tasting today Queen of Atlena and Riesling. These are the varieties of the area. Queen of Atlena as the Austrian variety itself for the white wines, and Riesling, the other main variety here in the area, because it's just
the sites in the soil.
Exactly, which are the perfect sites for Riesling. We do make some other wines too at the winery, some sweets, but also from Riesling, and some reds, but only, of course, cool climate reds from the variety. If you look at the variety, it's Saint Laurent and it's Zweigelt, also an Austrian variety, and of course Pinot Noir. Of course, means not that it's that common here in the area, but it's a perfect match, I would say, in terms of climate. And there are also some soils which really fit. That's a good reason still to have it, and we have it also because we like it. So, but that's done then more or less the whole picture. Well, I forgot one thing. It's called a gemischter Satz, which is a field blend. That's something which is really traditional Austrian, not only here to the area, but Austrian. And I think in some places in the winemaking world, you'd find that too, but here it's really tradition. And why it's tradition? Well, it's kind of, or it still is, but at that time it was a kind of insurance for the growers. They've put maybe 5 to 10 different varieties to one vineyard and made up wine out of it. So why did I say insurance? Clearly, they would have a harvest every year, more or less. But at that time, of course, they couldn't treat, the treatments weren't not that evolved at the moment here. And so also, of course, the blossom, for instance, and
the diseases, fungal diseases, different varieties are differently harmed by the diseases. So it was that they at least get something, even though the muscat was bad or the Bouvier or something was bad, they still get something.
Exactly. So the wines tasted differently every year, but they had something, and this was the good thing about it. Yeah, but let's go back to the varieties we have today, and so we come to the Queen of Atlena. As I already said, it's the main variety, the Austrian variety. Well, we're really happy to have that, because it's also not because it's only special, but it offers a so wide possibilities in production-wise, but also to use it for your meals. And what's also interesting, and that's something we really can taste today. It fits to different. You may not plant it on one soil type, but you can do it on different ones, and it always tastes different. And that's something really great. And here I can also can come back to the beginning of the winery. I wasn't born here, but I worked here before I started winery. And so I got to know the people, but also the vineyards. And it was fascinating for me, and I hope we can transport something of that to you. It was really fascinating to see the different phases of Queen of Atlena, especially Queen of Atlena and Riesling, on different soils. Yeah, we show you some pictures, of course, so we can bring you to the winery. Well, that's the people, and people is something important, I was told. So obviously it's me, it's Christina, and it's my son-in-law, at least to be.
Yeah. And yeah, that's us, the main people of Vineyard Wess.
Yeah, that's a map. I was already talking. In the middle, it's a town of Krems, and you see a map. We step already right into the winemaking part. You see Krems in the middle, the brown fields, and surrounded by the growing regions. To the very west, Wachau, Kremstal, in the north, Kamptal, and towards east, Wagram. If I do count everything together, we are talking about 3,000, 4,000 hectares in total. And we are, as I told you, we are in Kremstal. Kamptal starts only 1 kilometer north of us, and Wachau would be maybe starting 3 kilometers west from here. So everything is very small. Exactly. And when we're talking about vineyards,
so we were talking about what's the 1UWT before. We'll taste it afterwards. It stands for like for wheat, which is for single vineyard. And as we are in the Association of Österreichische Traditionsweingüter, I'm very sorry for this this long word and all the Ös. But it just stands for Premier Cru.
The ÖTW. And this long word, Österreichische Traditionsweingüter, the idea behind is about the same as they are for the German VDP. So to implement, that's the goal, to implement a classification system to the Austrian winemaking areas. This system, it started here in the Danube region with all the growing regions I told you before. And right now, in this month and maybe next year to come, or let's say next 2 years to come, you will see this classification covering whole Austria. So the goal is to have this classification to make it easier for you to understand whether this would be
special vineyards are in the
exactly
area.
If you're talking about a regional wine, about a village wine, or a Premier Cru, or even a Grand Cru. That's our winery. Traditionally here, the wineries are located sometimes outside of the towns, but sometimes also in
special streets, like where all winemakers have their cellars.
Exactly. So-called Kellergasse. Gasse means small street, and Keller, it's a cellar. And so you see the old part of the winery. When we bought the winery, we added, of course, a modern grape reception. This was done very differently to when the old winery was built. We don't even know exactly how old it is, but we think we were told at least 200 to 300 years. So we added the grape reception and made a gravity flow winery. Even though we are still small and don't want to be the biggest winery in the future, we do make a wine from about 15 hectares at the moment, and 15 to 20, that's already also what we kind of want to have. What's the goal for the future? While we're talking about that, we had a quite substantial change talking about the grapes we are processing. I mentioned I started the winery by just buying grapes because we had no vineyards. This was a very small cellar in a house, so we bought the grapes and made wine. And when we came here, the place is a bit bigger, and also we want to become a real winery. So we had the home for the winery, but also we transformed into more. We got more and more own vineyards instead of buying fruits. And at the moment, it's well, we don't buy any fruits anymore, but have our own vineyards.
Exactly, and also from not buying fruit anymore, we are also in transition to organic this year, so we can have our. It's a different feeling in your own. It's nothing bad about buying fruit, but it's a different feeling if you're taking care of your vineyard the whole year and getting that fruit in your cellar.
Exactly. Yeah. Christina mentioned we are in transition to organic wine growing certifying. We work organic since 4 to 5 years already, but without being organic. So it's not something new for us, but we have seen people wanna have
the proof.
Yeah,
the proof
exactly. Want to have the proof of what we are doing, which is fine for us. Well, that's our cellar. It's stainless steel mainly. There are not too many secrets about winemaking. What we could share, but what we can share, I'll tell you. The first thing in terms of style, and we will taste that afterwards. We want to have ripe grapes, but not overripe. And we want to have we want to make you taste the variety and also the vineyard where it comes from. So that means we don't want to cover these fruit flavors or flavors from the terroir by too much wood, and that's something which is quite common here with botrytis grapes. Yeah, we love botrytis, but only when it comes in small bottles as a sweet wine, not with the dry wines. And so we want to have. What we do is we pick everything by hand, and right at picking, we do select. Due to the Danube region, we do have, if we have not rain during harvest, which obviously we don't want to have, but we do still also have very often fog, and that's most of the time already enough to get botrytis, and therefore we have to select. And as I said, we do that already when we are picking. So we're getting clean fruit, and once we press, we have some kind of maceration time already in the press, but not without the stemming. So whole cluster processing, and then after pressing, the juice would be going down to the cellar, as I said, just by gravity, as gentle as possible, and then the juice will be settled down and goes into the fermentation tanks. Most of the time we don't add some yeast, so it's natural yeast fermentation. And after fermentation, the wines do rest on its fine lees as long as possible. And that's the second secret, if you want. The first was just clean grapes without botrytis, and the second long time on the fine lees before bottling. I think that quite gives the style we were told we have.
And also the quality on from the estate wines, we also have them on the fine lees. So having it on the fine lees, it's just getting a completer wine into the bottle, even though it's only the first level estate wine.
Exactly. That's also interesting. How should I say? When I started out, I thought it's really important. I mean, you await that the single vineyard wines would be very good, but if you're new to the markets, I thought it's really important to have also very nice first level wines. Otherwise, you won't be interested to taste further on. So this it's important still, and it is still important for us to have the first level wines, not only but also already them on a quality level which is just
also here as high as possible.
Yeah, exactly. Which means the same procedures in terms of winemaking as for the Grand Crus. Maybe not as long, but still. And that means for you, if you have one of the first level wines or the village wines, all these would also age very well. You don't need to be afraid for the creme style, for the first level wines, if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, even 8 to 10 years old. It will change its face, but it will still be fine. I have had already some nice things when I came to other countries and had to taste quite matured wines, also first level, and they were not only good but stunning. So I hope you'll have the same impression afterwards. Yeah, I told you we do make some Pinot Noir. That's the proof for that. Again, the bigger wooden casks we would use for our single vineyard, especially Gruners. We do want to give them, of course, in terms of winemaking, it's just different if you have it in stainless steel or in wooden casks. We do use here most of the time a mixture of acacia and oak, in order, again, was what I said before already. We don't want to have the oak flavors. We want to have neutral influence of wood, but of course it's different if you have wood or stainless steel. Alte Reben, old wines. For the Queen of Atlena, this is a very interesting story. in fact, because when this vineyard was offered to me, and it was already on the market for some years, people said, or I said when it was offered, okay, I'll go for it, but we will have one harvest and then we will replant. After the harvest, we sat together, tasted, and no, we won't replant. That's something which is really special, and you only can have it from old wines. This kind of quality, texture, even though the vineyards are, as I said, old, and the
crop and the whole yield is decreasing. Exactly, that's the old wines. But it's different. In Austria, you're not really used to having those old wines. And in Austria, you learn in school that a vineyard is already older when it's about 30 years old. And so we do not really have the practical knowledge of how old a vineyard here could be. And it's a common thing that you think that the yield will decrease enormous, but in fact it's of course it's lower, but it's different. One wine is super nice this year, but maybe we'll take a pause next year to have super nice fruit again the year afterwards. So it's a little bit different, and that's what's making it even more special.
Exactly. And of course, the Gruner Atlena planted at that time is a different grape than it's when you plant it now. And now I come back to Alter old wines. In this case, Christina was saying that people say it's old after 30 years. In this case, the vineyard is minimum 70 years old, and the oldest part is about 100 years old. So it's really old. That's the Riesling, one of the Riesling sites, and another secret in the middle, there is also a bit of Pinot Noir. On the right picture, you see how the
soil condition
is on the terrace especially. So it's really the wines are really grown into the rocks, and that's something you can taste, and what's especially for Riesling, that's perfect.
Yeah, sorry, can I ask a question? Because I wanted to ask, like, what is the landscape like over there? Is it very hilly? Is it very steep? Because you showed a couple of the pictures, but yeah, can you share with me like how steep is it?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, we have the Danube more or less in front of us. It's maybe 2 kilometers from here. So it's a valley, but here in Krems, it's very wide. But right after Krems, where the Bachau starts, the valley closes down, or the other way,
it opens up.
Yeah. So that's a place where it's if you look from west to east, where the valley opens up. But towards north, you have it's hilly. It's towards north, the altitude grows. So you have we will see also on the other terraces, on the pictures we will see that we have terraces. And
I think from the Paffenberg pictures, you can clearly see how the whole like a view from Bachau more or less into the Kremstein.
Yeah.
So I think
so we have both. Here we see the Mantil Berg. Berg means mountain. It's not really a mountain here. It's very. It's not flat, but you almost have the impression
soft
of
hill.
very soft hill, right? So it's a mixture of kind vineyards like that, and also steep terraces we saw already, but we will see further on. Maybe you can.
Yes, sure.
Maybe here. It looks like, well, not special, but it is special. Also, the vineyards here are old. That's the second wine we will taste, and also the soil is special. It's the only combination, or this combination of just sand in the upper soil and granite in the ground soil. I know it only from this vineyard, and this will you'll taste something very special, especially if you compare them with the next vineyard of Kogo. On the left side you see the both Kogo, right? So you see this the stone terraces from top of the hill, and in the background you see this the town of Krems and the river Danube. And here slate is the main soil, and this gives again a completely different flavor profile to the wines. It's mainly Riesling, planted to Riesling, but on some spots, and we have a vineyard there, Queen of Atlena is planted, so it's not us who planted the Queen of Atlena in this Riesling site there. It's also a vineyard which is about 60 years old. And the Pfaffenberg, also I think a very good picture where you can see the different landscape. It's the terraces here above the Danube River, and yeah, a Riesling grape, how it should be and how we like it. Yeah, that's quite perfect. If you can't see, I'm proud at this picture. I tell you, I was proud because that's the Leubenberg Vineyard, and the Leubenberg Vineyard. It was the first vineyard I was able to buy. So big step for me, a very small step for people, but for me it was a big step. And again, something special here. You see the Danube quite far down, and that's perfect. At that time, and this was already 15 years ago, about, or 12 years ago. At that time, climate change was something already known, but far away, more or less. And we are talking about here a vineyard which is about at an altitude of 440 meters, whereas the Danube down, where more or less also the Leubenberg starts, is at 220. Of course, it makes a difference if you make a wine at 220 or at 440 meters above sea. And at that time, people said, "Okay, let us have his Leubenberg vineyard as well."
It won't get ripe and
exactly.
won't work out. But now we are very, very happy to have not only the Leubenberg Riesling, but in general also with the Pfaffenberg vineyard sites, which are very cool, and of course very rocky and very cool. And yeah, what vineyards for the future?
Exactly, on the cooler side of the site. So this was our presentation, but we will come back to the pictures, I think, while we taste the wines. So, are there already any questions?
There are none so far, but
Okay.
let's wait for some questions. So I think for now we can continue with the tasting.
Yeah, the first wine is the Queen of Atlena 2018, and it's the Krems, which means Vinage wine. So I didn't mention, but if you compare if you want to compare the classification to something it's very similar. The building is similar to Burgundy. So you have Krems, and this would be the village wine, which means the grapes must come within the town of Krems in this case. And in our case, it's also even more important for us, the old wines. We are tasting the 18 vintage, a very warm vintage, but also I think I'm happy to be able to show the 18 here now, because it's on a stage where it's, I think I would say, perfect. We are, well, 21 is still in fermentation. 2019 are more or less sold out. But here, this wine is, I would say, on its first, the timing for tasting is just very good. And on the first step of aging, it has still its life ahead. And of course, when you have the younger vintages, you would have more fruit. Perfect. But all the wines do need some time to evolve and to show not only its fruit qualities, but also its minerality. Sometimes it's in the first years, it's just over layered by fruit. It's impressive and nice, but the real quality comes exactly after 1-2 years at least.
Especially like 18 was very warm vintage, so it has had a lot of fruit in the young years.
Yeah.
And I was compared to that it had a lot of baby fat, which now lost a little bit, and it's now a serious teenager more. At least.
I think it's also a quite good picture if you haven't tasted Queen of Atlena yet. I think it's a very good introduction, if I may say, on a higher level, but it's a very good introduction to Queen of Atlena. What's it all about? It's quite. I mean, the mineral parts is a surplus if you want, but the fruit flavors are really typical. This maybe green, but also we say peppery influence. That's something which is typical for the variety.
Yes, could you tell me a little bit more about the characteristics of Gruner of Atlena?
Well, yeah, the good thing, yeah.
No, I was going to say, like, the berries, is it early ripening? Is it difficult to handle, difficult to manage? What kind of high acids? Yeah, could you tell me about just...
Yeah, for the winemaker and on the growing side, it's I have to be honest, it's a great variety, because you can plant it almost everywhere. It will show different faces at different places, but it will grow, and it always be something. But the variety, as I said, should be mineral driven, and the fruit, when it's young, it's quite well, white peaches.
Very aromatic as well.
Yeah.
Like Queen of Atlena, the crossing of Queen of Atlena is very unique. So there is also some camina in it, especially when they're very young and fruity wines, like easy drinking, fast in the market wines. You can have this pure peach and also pear. Pear is something which pear and apple, but very ripe ones as well.
Mm.
And the Queen of Atlena grape in itself is a very, very large grape. So the large, there's also every year there's like the thing having the largest grape in Austria, and most of the time it's Queen of Atlena because it can grow like the size of the grapes could be like this and like half a bucket full with one grape, so it could be very, very big. But also in terms of it, the grape is big, the berries as well, but it's not that dense if you compare it to Riesling or to Chardonnay crossings, which are the whole cluster is denser. With Gruner Atlena, it's could be very loose and very nice. That's why it's not that likely to be infected with botrytis as well.
Yeah, and it's earlier ripening as the Riesling. So we start picking the Gruner before we pick the Rieslings, and also the acid level, of course, depending on the vintage, but the acid levels are lower than for the Rieslings. But again, it varies where the vineyards are located, on which soil, and also on the microclimate. We do have, apart from the sites where you already saw the pictures, some even cooler sites, and there the acid level can be higher, almost Riesling-like, really.
Okay.
So, but that's in terms of winemaking, something really interesting and also important, especially we all know it becomes warmer. But if we have some cool spots, that's in terms of winemaking, in terms of the overall quality of the wines, really good. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm enjoying your wines.
Very good. Like to hear that.
Shall we go to the next wine, the second wine?
Yes, we can.
So for that, another very, very Austrian word for naming a single vineyard is now this is Ried Weinzierberg. Ried means single vineyard. Weinzierberg, it's Weinziel is a part of Krems, and Berg, hill, and it's more or less described as one of the oldest vineyards in Kremstal and Krems, and it's the winemaker's hill, more or less. So,
exactly.
Because in Weinziel, most of the winemakers of Krems were located.
Some 100 years before.
Yes.
There still are, but this special place of Krems, that's the winemaker's place. Yeah.
I like the way you label the wines, and then you have the vineyard, and then you have a little dash.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we wanted to like show where the vineyards are located, either more east and west, and in this case, it's the most east located vineyard which we have. So therefore. And by the way, since you're talking about labels, when we founded the winery, you don't see, but you have it in front. When we founded the winery, I was sure I wanted to have a label which wouldn't be traditional. We had no tradition, so it wouldn't make sense. And also wanted to have a label which would be as easy as possible, at least, to read for you. Not only understandable in Austria, which means, I mean, at that time we had labels which were full of
things,
information, but non-information. Just writing and not easy to read. So I wanted to focus on the things which are necessary. So it's a name, it's variety, the vineyards, and the vintage, and that's it. And before, I mean, there will be the question, why do you have the three triangles, right? It's the W. Inside there is W for Wess. If you see it, it's great. If you don't see them on first hand, doesn't matter as long as you recognize the label.
And also another thing about them is that they are hills. The three triangles are hills. And also if you have it on your table and compare it, the Weinzelberg, Kogo, Leubenberg, and Pfaffenberg, the writing, and it's always another hill, and it's really on the left side it's really the Leubenberg, in the middle the Pfaffenberg, and the right side the Kogo and Weinzelberg. So it really shows you where the vineyard also is a little bit. So it's a little very small map as well.
Okay, I'm very impressed by the aromatics from the Weinzelberg, because comparing the first Alter Ruben, Queen of Atlena, and the Premier Cru, probably, is it going to be labeled a Grand Cru possibly this year?
No, at the moment it's still not recognized as a Premier Cru because nobody asked for it. And since we have this vineyard and we believe it's a special one, we're going to the association to talk about that site. So we think it will be recognized at least as Premier Cru for the future, but I can't say really, will this happen next year or
in 5 or in 10 years. So we are really working on it, but we are sad. For us, it's still Weinzelberg is a very unique site, so it stands itself anyway. But in the future, we're working to have a classification here as well.
Yeah, and in general, when I was talking before about the classification, at the moment we do have the first level wines, the wines of the region. We do have at the second level the village wines, and then we have the single vineyards. And the single vineyards at the moment are only Premier Crus and ÖTB. Within that group, and that's already a process which started, there will be the Grand Crus out of that group, right? So, and we do believe that the next one we will taste, the Kogo, it's on a very good way to become a Grand Cru, and this will then be called
Große Lage.
Große Lage. Yeah.
Like again compared to the BDP. So
Große Gewächs, yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something really important, and we'll have that too. It's so different compared to the first wine you tasted. It's even having the same vintage, which is, by the way, really great. The first vineyard, it's on loess soil, and this is about 10 to 15 meters deep. So there is only loess, nothing else, and no irrigation. So really,
the wines have to suffer, have to work a lot.
Exactly, and the roots are going down. The same is true here for the Weinzelberg, but once they go through the sand and loess horizon, they knock on the granite, and that's something you taste.
Especially on the Weinzelberg, the bouquet, yeah, I picked up notes of dry straw, like, a little bit ripeness, the dry straw.
Also, for me, also the Weinzelberg, even though we only use the already like 20-year-old small acacia barrel, which is 1,000 liter, you always have that like rosewood flavors in the nose and slightly on the palate, even like also thinking a little bit of cinnamon and like very, very spice notes.
Yes.
Yeah. But that's again really coming from the wines, from the soil, not from the wood. We know that because sometimes we do ferment also in stainless steel, and especially in the first year we did, and we were really surprised because we had it in stainless steel, but it tasted like a Chardonnay from the new barrel.
Yeah. So right after fermentation, Ryan and I were standing in front of it, and we were both like, we wouldn't believe it if we we're not like the ones who just pulled the wine from the tank. So.
Okay. I better push this along a little bit. We've got 4 more wines more to taste. Okay, so let's come on to the third. But I'll be talking about this one.
Right. So we do pour the third, and this one is Kogo, the steep terraces, which we have seen already before. And the main difference beside the terraces, which make, of course, also different, is the soil. And again, it's slate here. And in some, and 18 was a very special year to that because of its ripeness, because of the hot temperatures. We started to enjoy this wine in summer, not before. It was really, Christina mentioned very shy the term baby fat. This was
the fattest baby we ever had in this wine.
Exactly.
right after bottling and at our tasting, which we annually have from OTW, like 2 weeks after bottling, I was like, what is this? It's like super like bold, open, and you're like, it will be fine in some months, some years, and we are very glad that it turned out, because it's also I was always like avoiding when coming to a tasting or picking some wines for a tasting, was like avoiding that Kogo Queen of Atlena 18 and like really ignoring it. And then also my fiance David confused the vintages and was pouring it into my glass. He said it was by mistake, but I don't think so. But pouring it, and I was like, oh, I don't think that it's the Kogo Riesling 18, but what is it? And he was like, it's the Queen of Atlena 18. And then we also retasted it, and then didn't believe it, that it really just needed time. And also now it's showing fruit and elegance. None of it was showing it when it was young.
Yeah. I think it's a wine with really high potential to age. And the two here, Vineyard and the Kogo. But again, if it's maybe your first steps into Austrian wines, if you treat it, we would be proud, and I think you have the best result if you treat it almost like Burgundies. Meaning you can keep them, you should age them, and if you decant both of the wines here, would be great. And if you could use a very nice Burgundy glass, they
will shine.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's a very good, for me at least, it's a very good introduction to Queen of Atlena. And from your conversations about what the varietal is like, it absorbs the terroir. It is a grape that is a big bunch, but it has that potential and that versatility, to be able to be planted at different locations and to be able to absorb the terroir. And I think in these 3 wines, it's a showcase to me. It's a showcase to me on like old vines, Alter Ruben, and then you talk about Weizenberg, and you talk about that part where you say that in the Weizenberg it punches through the dusty terroir area all the way down towards the soil to absorb the minerals that it's showing. and then you do the tasting, the last two wines, the comparison between the Weizenburg and the Krug. Yeah, and you feel that baby fat and the other elegant lady that is showing that is just showing the flavors, and the baby chubby ones that's like, okay. Yeah. So I mean, I yeah, correct. And thank you. I think it's a very nice lineup to introduce me to what Gruner of Atlena, the potential of Gruner of Atlena can be.
Mm.
Yeah.
Good.
So I'm not sure whether, because I've got Ying and Annette here. Maybe they could share a little bit their views on what they feel about the wines. Ying, are you around?
Yes, I am. I'm just putting on my picture again.
Thank you, Ying.
Hi. Hi, my name is
Hi.
Ying. Yeah, no, very nice wines. Thank you very much. Obviously, a lot of love and care that's gone into making these wines. And I really enjoyed all of them, and I'm still sipping through. I've actually tasted all six: the Pinot Gris and not the Pinot Gris, the
Riesling.
Veltliner and the Riesling, which is a bit of a giveaway when I made that Freudian slip of the Pinot Gris, because it actually reminded me a little bit of Alsace Pinot Gris or Gruner Veltliner, the expression of the variety. I find Gruner a very difficult grape variety personally to get to grips with in terms of understanding, because there's so many different styles and expressions depending on where it comes from. And your particular style kind of reminded me a little bit of an Alsace Pinot Gris, but very nicely put together, very rich, almost honeyed in its character, but without the botrytis and so on. But with really nice backing acidity. And I particularly like the Kogo, which actually had a really nice, good backbone of acid. And actually, that's a good way for me to go into the Rieslings, because, and this is a quick question. Is the Kogo a better vineyard for Gruner than it is for Riesling? Because I felt there was a little bit more dimension to the Gruner than there was to the Riesling, or is that a function of the age of the vines? I wasn't quite sure what it was with the Kogo, because I felt the Pinot Gris expressed itself, not the Pinot Gris, the Gruner expressed itself better than the Riesling in the Kogo vineyard.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I believe, well, the Kogo Vineyard is known for Riesling.
Yeah.
It's known for Riesling because of its slate. But as I said, here we have quite old wines for the Gruner, which is especially a Fortune in 18, which was very dry and very hot. I'm not saying the Kogo wines are young, but still younger than the Gruners. That's one thing. And the other thing, I believe also, when we were talking about the baby fat here for the Gruner, still here for the Riesling. I do think that the Riesling do need even more time to evolve and to show its minerality than the Gruner. I'm not sure if I should say, but I tell you a story about the 11 vintage. 11 was, I would say, yeah, let's say the worst vintage I've ever experienced. Some people would say it was great and it was easy, but it was just so hot, so warm, so dry, and the wines were big.
Yeah,
big, and really big. We didn't like them at all, to be honest.
Yeah.
We were happy because people liked them.
Yeah, they were very. When they were young, they were impressive. Like they seemed even oily and like big and easy to approach. But yeah, they really needed such, especially for the Rieslings.
Yeah, especially. And to fulfill the story, we've sold the wines as we tried to, of course, every vintage. And well, then we forgot about the vintage. We tried to, at least. And some years after, it's maybe only 3 years ago, we got some requests from the UK. Do you have still some 11 vintage? In that particular case, we had no Kogo at that time, but the question about the Pfaffenberg. And we thought, what the hell is going on there? Yeah, but
need to drink in the UK.
Especially because this was a request from a very, very, very respected client, internationally known. You have now an outpost from them in Singapore. Now you maybe know whom I mean. They were asking about 11 Pfaffenberg if we still would have something. And by that occasion, we opened one bottle. And
because we were like, are they sure?
Are they sure you want to? And do we want to sell them really that wine? And we opened it. And
we were like,
it was a completely different wine what we have had in mind. So at least I do hope it's the same here.
Right.
I think the 17 is still like a forecast, what it will be showing.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's actually pretty helpful and interesting, because in a sense, I mean, I can see that happening with the warmer vintages. They're big and fat initially, and then with a little bit of age, and particularly I think the way you do it with the long aging on fine lees and stuff, perhaps a little bit more of that structure minerality comes through when it's lost a bit of its puppy fat in a way. So it'd be interesting to see how these vintages evolve. So the Riesling is a 17. So what was that similar in style to the 11?
Similar. The even better picture would be the 18.
Yeah.
But both 17 and 18 were warm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So interesting, because that's the impact of these warm vintages, is how they're actually going to evolve in bottles, not just the impact on the cultivation and the vineyard, but actually how the final product will actually end up in bottle. And I have to say, I've been pleasantly surprised how well this overall warming has been for most wines in Europe, where everyone's been worried about it getting too warm. But so far, so good, actually, in terms of what we've seen in the last 10 years of warming. And just going on to the Leubenberg. I really like the Leubenberg Riesling. That, for me, was just so classically showed what Riesling's all about. That structure, the finesse, the floral perfume, the slightly honeyed peach, grapey character coming through, but with that wonderful sort of spine and character of minerality coming through on the palate, and very lovely long finish. I really enjoyed the Leubenberg. I thought that was excellent. And how would you sort of rank the Leubenberg with your other vineyards, Pfaffenberg and
well, I would say if you look only on Riesling right now, if you have the Leubenberg, the Pfaffenberg, and the Kogo in front of you, they're at the same level in terms of quality, I would say. They have all a different face, which is great. Yeah. But I wouldn't say this one and this one is the better one. I wouldn't prefer one over the other.
Yeah. But very different expressions.
Yes, exactly.
Because with the Leubenberg, it's a very citric, dried lemon expression, which is a particular style of Riesling I actually personally quite like to have. It's not necessarily a German style. It's not necessarily, you get a much drier version of that with some of the Australian Rieslings. But I really love that citric character in that one. Yeah. It's a very nice expression.
Yeah, but I must add that's not our regular Leubenberg.
Okay.
This would be a bit drier. Right. I mean, this would be drier, much drier. I need really to say this wine which you tasted was an accident.
Ah, okay.
It fermented very, very long. You had two tanks of Loewenberg fermenting, and the Loewenberg, the regular one in 15, fermented through, and the other tank just needed its time. It fermented nearly a year, so it was very long.
Okay.
And it was like, okay, you bottle it and keep it for a year in bottles so that it can evolve already. And then let's see and taste. And that the time here really paid off. And because it fermented under, it was on the full yeast for the whole process of fermenting.
Right.
So
Yeah.
That's how it happened that's why it's reserved on the label.
Right. Right. Oh, it's turned out very well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
We have Alice now.
It's okay. We'll just go back to the sequence of tasting. Do you want to start with the Alter Ruben of the Riesling?
Yeah. The creme style.
The creme style, yes.
Yeah. Right. So the creme style. I think that's our first level Riesling from 3-4 small vineyards surrounding the winery, and our introduction to Riesling. With all its Riesling characters, I think, which you would ask for, and well, easy to enjoy. That's the easy to enjoy on a certain level of exactly without being not serious. Yeah.
I think that's what all it is. It's like, when you're making wines, you have to look at, on a commercial level, you look at the different kind of clienteles that will be enjoying the wines. People that wanted something to be not too, it's complex, but not too complicated.
Exactly.
Yeah, correct. So,
especially because Riesling, because of its acidity, and when it's then too complex and too much minerality, it can be less approachable. And if that happens on the first level, it should be easy to enjoy, just as a nice glass of Riesling.
On the terrace, easy to enjoy.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's like, you can have a house party, and then you have your children, you have your kids running around, and then you have people just enjoying the conversation, and you want a nice bottle of wine to complement the occasion. I think this is what I feel about first level wine. And then thereafter, you have a different occasion where people talk about the complexity, people talk about the terroir, people talk about what the nuisances you can get from the different wines. I think that's just what wine is. And when you are in the privilege of being a winemaker, you look for the different plots, you look for on how to fulfill the wants and the needs of every one of a clientele that actually picked up that bottle of wine from you. I think that's how I see our first level.
Exactly. Yeah. That's it.
Okay, so do you want to taste the second and the third wine together? Yeah. One is the Laubenberg, which is what Ying talked about, and that you proudly purchased the property in 2015. Yes. And the next one is Kogo.
Kogo, yeah.
Yes.
Kogo 17. Maybe you taste this one first, then the Reserve Laubenberg. I think the 7 Kogo for me, it's again at the beginning to show as it should be. On the palate, I think it shows already very nice minerality, but on the nose, it's still too young. It shows tropical fruit, more tropical fruit than peach, and it's very much fruit. Still for me, at the beginning. Again, if you serve now, I would decant and to help its growing.
Because also, what I think is, of course, in the nose you have the tropical young Riesling flavors, but you can still already recognize in the palate the structure of Kogo shining through, glimmering through, which will be even nicer. But also, what you have, even though it's a young wine, the finish is already complex. It's when you spit it out, you still have that also that slightly smoked tropical fruits, and that smokiness comes from the slate of the Kogo.
One thing what shows me also that the wine is starting to be on its first opening point, if you want. The wine has, in fact, some residual sugar. I think about six grams. So in German terms, not much, but still it has some. And it showed it's quite obvious when it was younger, but doesn't show it's that upfront anymore. So it's again already more mineral, and I would even say it needs this bit of residual sugar to have a complex and well-aged wine.
Okay, I've got a question over here. Actually, it's from Annette. Yeah, she tasted the wines, but unfortunately, she has to leave pretty quickly. Okay, her question was, did you acidify the 2018 vintage? So basically, she attended a Prima tasting, and she found that some of the wines were a little bit flabby upon the initial approach. Yeah, but I believe she finds that your wines is well balanced with good acids, with freshness. So this was questions that actually intrigued her. Like she wondered.
If the question was if he added acidity.
Yes, is that even allowed?
It is allowed.
It is him. It's not every year. It's not every year allowed. It was in 18. It was allowed, but no, we didn't.
Okay.
I've tried. I don't remember. Maybe it was 11 or 12 when we tried to do add acidity to help the wines. But I always wasn't really happy with the result. And
also, what you can taste from that different tastings, and afterwards you really recognize when you add acidity, it's really standing next to the whole aromas.
It's not blending. It's not blending. It's not integrated. Yeah, exactly. It's not integrated nicely. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
The question for me, or why I believe that this is not the case with our wines. If we would taste now, or if we would have tasted the wines 2 years before, same vintage, we would have maybe the impression that there would be too little acidity. I think that's also something which shows with the age, but only because it's a question of picking time, I would say. Even in warm years, of course, we pick earlier than in cooler years. We do, of course, but not too early. There is the danger that you have maybe a little bit of acidity, a higher acidity level, but if you pick just maybe a bit for some days too early, you have not the full ripeness, physiological ripeness, and that's something. That's the worst thing ever.
Yeah, I think
what-
then a
what-
bold wine with green flavors, acidity.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what I really think also it comes now as acidity as well with the Kogo and Mantelberg, that there is a lot of phenols and structure in it, which is now showing, which could be fake acidity a little bit, like lifting the acidity.
Together with the minerality. That's also something what we have seen. Even if the acidity is on a lower level, but you picked on the right time, having the full physiological ripeness, even though if the wines show big in its first 1-2 years, they evolve way better after some time. That's again, this was the 11 story, but we have had that also with the other way around in a cooler vintage with the Paffenberg Riesling 16. The acidity was not that bad. It was here, but the minerality was really high. This was really,
and it was really, when it was young, it was even tasted harsh. It was not really approachable. The whole wine was closed and harsh.
So cool vintage, the minerality was here very soon. The acidity on a bit higher level, so it was the other way around. It wasn't drinkable in the first 2 years, more or less, because of this combination of minerality and acidity. Again, the acidity wasn't
Super
if you would have looked only at the figures, what do you have? But together with the minerality, it was really not enjoyable. Now it's a different wine. It's stunning at the moment.
It is stunning. Yes, it is stunning.
Yes.
And it's just like saying that, the Weizenberg is smoky, flinty, and very, very precise. So good job to that. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
She has one more question. Okay. The residual sugar for Riesling 2020, what was it?
For the Kremstein Riesling
Kremstyle
was
2020. Yeah.
was also something between 6 and 7 grams per liter.
Thank you. And in the Riesling lined up, I think she complimented on the Kruger. It's very elegant, powerful, and very structured. So I think for me is I look at it as I think with all the reviews, even for myself, the Weizenberg stood out very well in terms of the complexity and the flavors that it's showing now. Yeah. And for the Kruger Vineyard that you have, both Queen of Atlena and both Riesling, they seem to perform a little bit differently. Like, it's like it depends on the terroir, it depends on the soil, how each varietal is able to absorb and to be able to show its potential at its current moment. And of course, the two vintages that we're tasting today is different. One is a 2017 and one is an 18. 17 is a cooler vintage, right? 18 is a warmer vintage, right?
Both are quite warm.
Right. Okay.
17 not as bad as 18.
18 was drier.
Yeah.
Drier, yeah.
Yeah, it was more, it both were hot, but 18 was also super dry.
Well, I think it's a lovely tasting, it's a lovely lineup. And guys, do you know whether we have any more questions? Okay, so we talk about we started with we're a little bit messed up here. Okay, so we talk about the Creme style Riesling, then we went to Kruger Riesling, and then we talk about a Lobenberg Riesling.
Yeah. As I mentioned already earlier, this wine was a mistake. We had 2 small tanks of the Riesling, same juice. One fermented through was the Leubenberg, and the other took much longer and didn't ferment through till the end. So we have some residual sugar for, I think, 27 grams, something like that. And again, without botrytis. So it's not, if we would have wanted to make a sweet wine, of course we would have had botrytis grapes. But here is no botrytis because it was meant to become Leuvenberg. I mean, it's still Leuvenberg, but again with the residual sugar. And so since we liked the wine, we also bottled it. And even though it was at the first hand a mistake, it's something which people do enjoy.
I sense
including us.
Including us, yeah.
Because it's not with all the that you say it's residual sugar and the warm vintage and everything, but it has acidity, and especially that structure from Leuvenberg with that acidity as well, and that lower alcohol. But super nice also with food, and it's an eternal wine. It has acidity, phenolics, and residual sugar. We always say, I don't know how long we will live, but the wine will be still nice. So
Yeah.
I sense a hesitation there a little bit when you talk about whether the bottling of it, whether it's a mistake or not a mistake. So in your opinion, right, if there ever is a vintage where it wasn't up to par, be it Mother Nature wasn't so kind to you. Do you think, in Burgundy, people talk about declassifying, people talk about, not making that vintage, even in Champagne. What do you think your opinion would be if it ever happens? What do you think it would be?
We wouldn't also for instance, as we said before, we are producing Pinot as well.
Yeah.
We didn't do a Pinot 2020. As we said, the quality wasn't not at that high level as we wanted to have it. But for Kogo, Queen of Atlena 17 is also not existing because we said it's not something we want to show as kind of as Kogo. So we do.
And it's just.
But in this case, we really liked the outcome, even though it was not Leuvenberg Riesling. I really liked it as it was. So
yeah, I mean, I say mistake because it wasn't the plan to do that, but everything else we are okay with.
Yeah, no, it's okay, because I hear of other vineyards, other wineries, like, where they find that the wine wasn't something that was suitable to the style, they left it alone. And then, after 1 year, you find that the wine changed, the wine evolved, and they are showing a different characteristics. And I think that is what I picked up from Christina just now, that, you guys decided to put the word reserved on it. It's like when you decided to put a word reserved on it, was it your initial plan to release it? Maybe not, you lay it there for a little bit while longer and it developed. And when it developed, you think that you want to show the world, you want to show the clients what it could be. Yeah,
exactly. That's why first it was a mistake, and then we were quite really proud of that mistake and named it Reserve, because we said we kept it now for so long, and we still found a way to bring it also on the market, and we said it's still super unique and nice, even though it's something which we wouldn't produce every year, and that's why we said it's even more
but I think for myself,
extraordinary.
Yeah, for myself, what I find that note itself is amazing, because it's like, when you work with wineries that is proprietary owned, that it's, you can do such things. You can do such things like lay your barrel aside and decided to label it separately, just because it may be 1 in 10 years, 1 in 20 years that you see something like that happens. Yeah, so I think that itself, it's what's amazing in the wine industry, in a proprietor owned winery. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, you can take care about individual things which happen every year.
past vineyards, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I think all of us has a great tasting today, and personally for myself, it's a nice introduction to Queen of Atlena, and it's a nice introduction to what's the potential of Austria wines can be. And I can't wait to share a story. I can't wait to taste a little bit more. I can't wait to get to understand the development of your wines. And so before I end the session, I'd like to thank you. Raina, thank you very much. Christina, thank you very much. And when the S space is open and everybody is easier to travel around, we welcome you to Singapore. And yeah, to meet you in person, to taste the wines together with you, with some food, with the clients. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Thank
very
you.
amazing.
This would be amazing. We are looking forward to that. And thanks again for this opportunity to show wines.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening ahead. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye. You as well.
Yes, goodbye, everyone.